At one point in time on one of the jets that they were renting, they were smoking so much weed in the back that the crew and captain had to put on the oxygen mask just so that they wouldn't get high and crash the plane.
Welcome to the Chasing Mountains podcast. Today we're talking about Adam Neumann. We're also joined by our friend Phil Schafer.
Phil is an aromatherapy consultant for the cast and crew of Duck Dynasty. I don't know how, but last year he made $1.6 million. I don't know if aromatherapy is somehow some secret way of laundering money, but the man is a pro at what he does. All right, so none of that was true.
And I smell good.
He took 60 seconds to think through what he was going to say there before the show, and that was good. That was worth it.
That was impressive.
I had a second one that I thought
Can I hear both of them?
Okay, I was going to say he is a Fiverr.com hired assassin. If you have debt collectors, if you have callers, he will find them, hunt them down, and beat them to death with a box of rocks picked by you. Something like that. And it's like 1-800-murder.com.
You came up with both of those in a minute.
That's impressive.
That is insane.
Well, man. I picked the other one because it was easier to remember.
Aromatherapy. Yeah, but
it was like a whole novel. That was crazy.
I am a writer.
I feel like that's
good.
That's a profession that a salon owner would come up with as a aromatherapy consultant.
Well, I thought of that because of my wife's salon. Someone was an aromatherapy person, and I thought that they
Duck Dynasty piece though. That's good.
Well, I thought about we're bearded men.
You know those guys are stinky.
Well, maybe that's another podcast episode. Is what if that was true? What would the different scents be? Because they would have to be all Duck Dynasty branded, I
like it.
Like how many? Let's come and we can have candles, and
campfire,
and pomade, if that's a thing. Sorry, that was very
plosive.
Yeah.
Look, so we're kind of making this work with this random mic, but Phil is
working.
Okay, he is not an aromatherapy consultant for Duck Dynasty. Phil is an engineer, a very smart man. He's an investor, and so we had fun on him with you coming in last week, and so we figured we'd just try it again.
No, this is super fun. I appreciate you guys having me.
And he knows a lot about Adam Neumann.
Yeah.
Who is actually our topic today. So,
Phil, who is Adam Neumann and why do we care?
Yeah. Okay. So Adam Neumann is about 43 years old and he is a kind of a billionaire investor now, but he was born in Israel. His parents divorced when he was 7. And he lived in 13 different homes by the time he was 22.
That sounds like your guys' upbringing.
Does sound like me. Yeah. Minus the Israel thing.
Right.
Yeah. He has dyslexia. And so he could not read or write until he was in 3rd grade.
God, that sounds really familiar. I have real bad dyslexia too.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yeah. Did you know most CEOs have dyslexia or ADD?
No.
Yeah.
It's really common.
Wow. Very. It's like 80% of them do.
Wow. Dyslexia, source there.
ADD. What's your problem?
He has us as friends.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
It rubs off on me.
Uh-huh.
But here's crazy. So he served in the Israeli Navy from age 17 to 22, and he got all the way to the rank of a captain by the time he left the Navy in 2001.
Isn't it mandatory? Everybody has to serve their term?
Yeah. So did his 5 years, got out at 22. It was 2001, and then eventually he moved to New York City, went to business school, got into business. First business venture was a children's clothing company called Crawlers.
Which
good
actually
name.
It's not a bad idea because it was kids' clothing with knee pads inserted into the clothing.
Yeah, it was probably bulletproof too. Coming from the Navy, you probably had a special
I'm just saying, my kids fall all the time and their poor little knees are covered in bruises. And sometimes I thought it'd be fun to just strap on knee pads and let them go. But the company did not do well.
No. And then he gets into shared workspace. It's an allusion to what we're going to be talking about for this episode. Shared workspace at a company called Green Desk.
Now he founded that, correct? Him and his buddies?
I think so. And then
when was this? Was this during the pandemic?
No. This is early 2000s.
Oh, okay.
Mid 2000s. Okay. Then he and his friend, they sold their stake in Green Desk for a nice profit. They also got $15 million from another outside investor, and they founded WeWork in 2010.
Okay. So this was all
at age 31.
Wow.
Because obviously I ask about the pandemic piece because suddenly everybody, to one degree or another, is quite familiar and comfortable with working remotely, and I know that like the idea of a workspace, community, things like that. That's become, more popular. But so he was like way ahead of that.
Green Desk was actually, they were renting out desks in offices.
Yes.
And it was clever at the time because, as well as I do, it's hard to get a lease sometimes that's favorable to you. It's like 3 or 5 year terms. It's like, bro, my company might want to move on or move to another state or got a business in 6 months. It's hard to commit to 5 years. So he was able to secure those deals and then rent out spaces. So, and then he started at WeWork. What year?
WeWork is in 2010, and it was very similar to Green Desk. It's basically they owned office buildings, and then they leased them out as shared workspaces to entrepreneurs, to remote employees. So like maybe your company is based in Delaware, but you live in Arizona. Well, you could rent out a little, like maybe one office room in a WeWork building, and instead of having like an office space in your home or
almost
your
like
apartment or something.
Airbnb kind of for offices, but not that short of terms.
It was big on startup companies too, right? Because you have 10 employees and maybe you need 3 rooms, and then all of a sudden the next month you hire 2 more people and you need another one. That hyper flexibility, shared workspace type stuff.
Except
we've done several meetings in WeWork buildings in Nashville.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
You just didn't know.
You just didn't know it. All the cool offices were like,
so we were talking about this though. You bring up Airbnb. Isn't one of the key differences though that WeWork actually owns the real estate? Like they own that office.
That's where it gets a little bit interesting, Jake. Why don't
which we could talk about that.
Am I jumping ahead?
A little bit, but let me back up just a smidge. So at this moment, he's kind of a villain right now.
Right.
And the reason he's a villain is because there were some issues with going public. And when you go public, you have to do, is it called an S1?
Yeah. There's a bunch of documents, but yeah.
Particularly, I believe the S1 had a bunch of like damning evidence about their practices and how much money he's getting, the stuff they're doing. So at this moment, the company went from a $47 billion evaluation, which was stupid. That was too much. Now, when it just went public, a couple weeks ago, a month ago or something?
I can't remember exactly, but it was recent.
It was recent
They
enough.
had to merge with the SPAC, and it kind of,
$9 billion was the evaluation. Yes. I mean, I would be happy to have a company that was worth $9 billion, but it went from a $47 billion to $9 billion, and they had to oust him as CEO. And so a lot of people are calling him fraud. They're calling him like a cult leader. They're calling like everything you could think of at the moment. So he's kind of a villain right now. Yeah. And we're talking about him kind of telling the journey. So,
because he made hundreds of millions of dollars because he was a founder. He got in early, but then the IPO kind of fails. He leaves. He had to sell off stock and kind of remove his majority position and get out. So he made tons of money. But everybody that invested at $47 billion valuation has lost 80% of their.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's part of where the villain thing is coming from.
Yeah.
And another thing why he's a villain is because they would say, look, I know you normally get $160 for your job. We're going to pay you $80, but we're going to give you the remainder in like stock options. And it was evaluated so much.
Which is like really, well, go ahead. Sorry.
That's a normal thing in startups to do.
Yeah.
But it went on for a long time. And so it was at that $47 billion valuation. So all that investment they had in the company went away. Then they lost their jobs because they laid off like 20,000 people or something. A
lot of people.
All that being said, back to what you were saying about the buildings, it's kind of unclear what was happening as far as owning the buildings, because what it seems like is they were leasing the buildings, and then Adam, the CEO, started another company, and he was purchasing buildings and then leasing them to his own company. So we don't know if there was like tax benefits, like we talked about this upstairs when we were eating pizza.
So Adam Neumann owned buildings,
owned them personally,
and then he was leasing them to WeWork,
Adam Neumann's company,
where he was the CEO, and then WeWork would then sublease them. So it's kind of like sublease of a sublease, right? Yeah. And they would lease them to Dave Rumer LLC.
But I don't see anything wrong with that.
No, but it's the cost.
People do that. People do that all the time. Like let's take him as an individual out of it. People all the time have LLC A over here, provide service for LLC B. Like I don't see any.
Right. So here's
is
where
it the evaluation? Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, so here's where the numbers come in. So typically they had the leases on the buildings were 15-year contracts, right? Or mortgages, right? Well, then WeWork would spend, you guys talked about, you've been in some WeWork buildings. They spend tons of money renovating them, and they're like the nicest office buildings ever. There's like beer coolers everywhere and stuff.
They're literally
really
arcades
cool.
sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah. And so they have all these amazing amenities, right? And then the problem is they would then sublease these to small fledgling companies, right? And the average, and you could have as few as one employee, and you could lease by the hour, apparently by the minute, but definitely by the hour, by the day, by the month. But the average lease term ended up being about 15 months. So WeWork has a 15-year mortgage, and they're hundreds of millions of dollars, but then they're trying to generate revenue off of that, and their commitments from their customers only averaged about 15 months. And that's a huge risk, right? Because you have such short term, and there's lots of turnover. We talked about this before. Like,
you got to touch it a lot.
Right. You have to touch it constantly. If
it.
somebody's renting for 3 months and then they're out, and then you got to fill that. And so like, it was probably hard to maintain a consistent occupancy rate, or at least a very high occupancy rate, which you would need to make sure you have a good foundation to pay those 15-year obligations to the banks.
You know how we were talking about earlier, why it doesn't feel like revolutionary? And they definitely were drinking their own Kool-Aid when it comes towards like the We universe that they would always be talking about, or the, WeWorks We live.
Yeah, their mission was to elevate the world's consciousness, which is very high-minded for an office building subletting.
For commercial real estate company, basically.
But one thing I do want to say that I believe they did do well was corporate offices sucked. Like buildings sucked.
Yeah.
That takes us back to the back rooms conversation.
Totally.
Fluorescent lights.
Sterile.
Yeah.
Like just no music.
You weren't here for
nothing.
that. Do
Just
you know about the back
sound.
rooms?
The back rooms?
Yeah.
At WeWork buildings?
No. So
We'll send you our podcast link.
Geez.
It's a whole thing.
It's has to do with like the Matrix and stuff like that.
Oh,
and we
okay,
get stuck in it.
okay.
It's out there. It's also out there on YouTube. You can watch it.
Right.
Yeah. We talked about it. It's a whole thing.
My thing is about that is it was a cool thing that they were doing, but they grew so fast, so quick in the beginning. Yep. And then all these investors started coming in and investing money. And a lot of what was going on in that 2009 to really 2019, that 10-year period it was all about growth. It was not about revenue. It was all about growth.
With artificially low interest rates.
Yes. And so people were just dumping. It's all about growing. It didn't matter about making money. And a lot of that was because Amazon operated at a loss on purpose for so many years to dominate the market. And that's what happened here.
Yep.
Was people were coming in and like, it doesn't matter. We're not worried about profit. Let's just find more investors. And one day when we own the market, we switch to profitability. So that's what everybody was wanting to be, as a Jeff Bezos. And he really, I feel like, was feeling like he's that next thing. Tell a little bit about SoftBank.
Yeah.
Do you know, I don't know too much about SoftBank, but can you just SoftBank is a massive investor for them. So just tell me a little bit about SoftBank and when they got involved.
So SoftBank is a giant holding company based in Japan. The founder, Masayoshi Son, I think I said that right, is a brilliant investor. He's got several different funds kind of folded into SoftBank, and the Vision Fund, the SoftBank Vision Fund, is kind of like the flagship fund.
It's like one of the biggest funds out there.
And they
Saudi money.
Yeah, they invested. He's hit a lot of home runs. I think the most recent number I was able to find was from 2020, and they did like $58 billion in revenue as a holding company. Right? That's pretty good. And so this guy knew investing. They invest in a lot of AI stuff, a lot of tech. Like, this guy knows tech. One of the best investors in tech ever. Well, they latch on to Adam Neumann and WeWork, and they start dumping billions in. Now, at one point I read their commitment was as high as 11 billion. Now, they didn't. I don't know that they got all 11 billion into the company.
They got eventually 9,
but they did. Okay, so they ended up getting 9 billion in. So again, now remember, they tried to IPO at 47, and they ended up it fell all the way down to 9 billion. Well, the Vision Fund, SoftBank, put 9 billion in. That's not great. That's not great. That they by themselves put in the equivalent of the whole company's valuation. That's horrible.
Plus, my understanding is that Adam Neumann, when he left, he got $1 billion.
close to it.
So some of it was cash and a lot of it was also in options to sell, I believe. I'm not 100% certain on that, but I believe a lot of it was stock.
But a good
at
chunk
the
of it
current
he
valuation.
took with him.
Yeah. And I know eventually he did realize some of that stock.
Right. But he had what, 30%. So he was the majority shareholder, and to step down as a CEO and sort of oust him from power, he was sort of forced to sell a bunch of that to not be the majority shareholder anymore. Well, that's money that he makes. So it was kind of a negative situation for him in that he's sort of being ousted and there's this controversy and stuff, but he was sort of forced to profit off of it realize the profits.
That's when when you're talking about billions of dollars and you also are in control of that company, like you're walking away with money. You have leverage against some people. Backtrack just a smidge. The idea behind SoftBank was if we just dump enough money at it, they're going to become the market leaders.
Yeah.
And we'll figure out the profit later. And they believed Adam Neumann was a good enough salesman to convince a lot of people to give him billions of dollars. At the end of the day, whether or not he's a scam artist or not, that is a skill right there. I've never convinced anybody to give me $1 billion, and I'm not sure I could. I don't know what it is. As I look at him, he's an odd looking creature. I'd be like, I'm sure he's a good guy, but look, I'm an odd looking creature. I'm okay with it. But as I look at him,
he's a little odd looking.
He doesn't quite, if someone said lizard person, I'd be like, yeah, I get it.
Well, we can talk about this too. Like commercial real estate can be difficult to win in, but there's a lot of people that have done really well with it. And so it's not like the problem wasn't necessarily commercial real estate. I think it was partly the execution of it and also this hyper focus on branding. Maybe we want to talk a little bit about the we thing and elevating the world's consciousness and wanting WeWork to be on Mars.
So I was going to ask you guys, like, do you think that that's part of what allowed him to get more buy-in from people, is that he wasn't just another guy who was investing in commercial real estate? What he would talk about was not commercial real estate per se. He was talking about these higher ideals.
He was trying to make it cool. He was trying to make commercial real estate cool. And honestly, usually commercial real estate is boring.
But I feel like he achieved that a little bit.
Yeah.
And I know everybody's like naysaying him right now, but if that would have went off at $47 billion evaluation and the IPO he would be considered a hero. All the bad things he did.
Yeah.
Would everybody be like, oh, that's just part of being a rock star CEO? But that goes to what we were talking about earlier when we were eating pizza. And so if I have pizza in my teeth, it's because of the good pizza. Same. But we were talking about sometimes the CEOs who found the company are not the same CEOs that should be there for that $20 billion or $10 million. I mean, there's been times that I'm pretty good at starting a company. Sometimes I almost feel like I need someone to come in and just like maintain the company and just, and worry about little incremental growth instead of like,
so you can move on to the next idea. Cause that's where you're strongest.
And I feel like you see that in Adam. He couldn't stay focused on just WeWork buildings. He had like We Learn or We Live. What was
We Live was kind of which we'll kind of get into the 2.0 of that, but it was like commercial real estate, but it was focused on living space. We Live. And there was the quote unquote controversy with trademarking the word we, which you can't really trademark a word, but so there's some stuff going on with that. But there was also some controversies too. I mean, they had as far as I can tell, unlimited beer consumption in their corporate offices. Which no wonder everybody wanted to work for him. And then there was a controversy in 2018. He was interviewing a woman for a job at WeWork, and apparently he tried to get her to take some tequila shots, and that kind of got out. She accused him of sexual harassment. And then as a result of that, they sort of tamped down on the alcohol consumption in the office. They set the limit at the New York office to 4 beers a day. It was unlimited, and they brought it down to 4.
Just 4?
Yeah. And that was one of the big selling, but that was one of the big selling points of the company. It's this cool, new, hip, branded company. WeWork, we're elevating the world's consciousness. Everyone can drink beer as much as they want at work. And it's like,
did we have a limit back when I worked for you?
I mean, if we could have afforded it, we'd have been like, you could have 3 waters today. I'm kidding.
But is that like, I don't know of another successful company where that was like a policy and everything worked out just fine.
Yeah. So part of the problem was, like you said, you were talking about branding. everything seemed to be focused on branding and just expanding, that they weren't actually a viable company and it didn't function well. At one point in time, was it in 2019? I'm not 100% certain, but I believe it was 2019 that they brought in like $1.2 billion, which sounds great, but they had a loss of $1.9 billion.
Yeah.
So it's like that's a lot of loss. And so people weren't worried about that at the moment, but all of a sudden people switched over to wanting to have profitable companies and they couldn't pivot quick enough.
Yeah.
That's why they wanted to go public, because SoftBank had a commitment of an additional $2 billion to come in and fund the company. And so they were spending like they were going to have $2 billion. And then SoftBank came in and said, we're not going to do it right now. Here's my reasonings. And that put them in a panic. And so they were preparing for this going public. And that's why a lot of the stuff in the paperwork looked kind of just thrown together and looked pretty bad.
And as long as that IPO goes, let's say at 47 billion, there's probably going to be most IPOs you dip initially, but once that sucker goes public and everybody buys in, and you get Adam Neumann on a TED Talk or on a couple YouTube videos, like people are going to start piling in. The infusion of cash was probably going to be there, but like you said, the business, whether it was a terrible business model or just not being executed properly, like we could debate that. But like from 2014 to 2019, their memberships or their customers more than doubled every single year. Now, if you're running like a software company, for instance, and your subscribers or your customers are doubling every year, you should be printing money as fast as possible. But their losses grew faster than the revenue was. So their business was not scaling well.
Well, because you have to acquire assets, you have to remodel buildings, you have to have these leases, and you have to get people to sign the lease. At the end of the day, they were just hemorrhaging money. And, he had this like $65 million jet that he was flying around in. I mean, it's all well and good for us to like judge how one does something right now. I took a moment when I was reading through a lot of this stuff and like, okay, if right now how I ran my companies was just public, like, I wonder how I would feel. Like, he eats a lot of Arby's. Why does he always get a large Dr. Pepper, that fat ass?
Yeah. But hold on. We were talking about this though before the podcast. There is this sort of trend with CEOs, and he seems like one of them who is choosing to be in the spotlight. He goes like out of his way to go on these shows, to do these talks, to go to these events. He seemed like I saw like footage of him at I don't know, like it almost looked like a music festival, like probably on stage and lights or something. So and we've talked about that.
That was their corporate office.
Oh yeah, all the kegs. Yeah. No, but we talked about this with like Zuckerberg. We've talked about this with Elon Musk. How like there's this sort of celebrity aspect where there's also a lot of like old CEOs that sort of quietly lead their companies quietly in terms of like publicity. Yeah. But like, if you choose to be in the spotlight and then everyone's like judging you for the Arby's that you eat, then it's kind of like, well, you're pursuing like a business model and a way of leadership that, sort of thrusts you into the public eye.
Here's an interesting story. Okay. So at one point in time on one of the jets that they were renting, they were smoking so much weed in the back that the like crew and captain had to put on the oxygen mask just so that they wouldn't get high and crash the plane.
Right. And then here's the rest of this. So they were flying to Israel, because remember, he's from Israel. They get off the plane. The pilots or the crew, they're going through like cleaning up the plane or whatever. They find a stash of weed in a cereal box. So they didn't get through all of it. And they kind of let Adam finds out. And there's like this mild freak out about drug trafficking violation.
Oh, shoot.
Yeah. And so then they ended up like they had to book like a different flight home. Nothing like ended up really happening from it. But again, this eventually so the
because they're technically bringing drugs into Israel, you said is where they were heading to.
So this happened in 2018. The sexual harassment thing with the tequila shots happened in 2018. And this is all kind of leading up to the 2019. So this is at the end, right? With the trademarking the word we, and then trying to trademark the word we, and then some of these other controversies. This is at the very end. This is leading up to the IPO. And it was kind of one of the things like that, plus the financials being disclosed as part of the IPO process was kind of like how it started to fall apart. But like, to get back to what you were saying, he's known for saying crazy things. Like, he wants to be the prime minister of Israel. Okay, fine. I mean, Donald Trump became our president. He wants to be the president of the world. He said this before. He wants to be the world's first trillionaire. He wants WeWork to be on Mars. He wants to live forever. Like,
he started on that note, he started investing money in like longevity stuff. He thought that aging was just a code error, which a lot of rich like billionaires think that he put a lot of money in like longevity studies. And I mean, let him invest. I'll take advantage of it.
And then you contrast that with, say, Warren Buffett, who is widely regarded as the greatest investor of all time by many people. Like everyone hangs on every single word he says, but also because the only words he ever says are in his like shareholder presentations and newsletters, where he talks about the investments that he and his company or Berkshire is making and like what he sees the market's doing. So he only ever is quoted talking about the thing that he knows more than anybody else at. Whereas a lot of these CEOs, they get this money and this power and they go the fame route, and they get way like out of their lane. They
go on Joe Rogan and start talking about like commenting on all kinds of things. Yeah.
Well, I watched an interview today when prepping for the podcast where he was reflecting on like this whole debacle of him being ousted from WeWork, the money that he lost the company, all the people being fired, how dare he make all these billions of dollars while all these people are losing their jobs and their
sort
investment.
of forced to make the money, but people don't see it that way. Yeah.
And I mean, if he could give it away if he wanted to, but like, I wouldn't advise that. But like, he was reflecting. It was the first time in 2 years he's come out and he's talked to this person. I believe it was 9 months ago this thing was recorded, and they were kind of giving him some hard questions, and some of them he just didn't have great answers for. But one thing that stood out to me, he talked about just a lot of regrets of how things happened. A regret that stood out to me was, he said in the heyday of like WeWork, when he was the talk of the town, he was the rock star. He had a meeting with Tim Cook, and he had a 70 or 90 minute meeting with Tim Cook. And he said, my biggest regret is I didn't shut up. I talked the whole time.
Yeah.
I had an opportunity with this amazing, one of the most brilliant CEOs in the world that took it from a several $100 million company to a multi-trillion-dollar company. And he goes, and I did all the talking. What a fool. And I, unfortunately, have related to that because there's been many times where I'm in a situation where I could learn, and I just didn't shut the F up. And
That's really good.
I felt that way myself. It's just like, why did you talk so much? You had an opportunity for wisdom. And it's interesting that he, in a lot of things that he regretted, was that moment. And I related to that a lot. And that's something that I've been trying to do. And it's literally in my book quarterly. It's like, talk less, listen more. And that's literally one of my to-dos. It's something that I think we can all learn from. It's just sometimes just shut up. Meanwhile, I have a podcast and I talk too damn much.
Yeah, I was going to say, you can't follow that too closely.
Yeah.
Because you have to talk for your podcast.
But I think he has a lot of regrets. I do feel he's a little like he definitely believed in himself a little too much. But like, what about fake it till you make it type thing? Was it that, or was it fraud at some point in time? Because what is fake it till you make it, or what is fraud? Are they kind of the same thing?
Yeah. Well, like to your point, if he had made it, we would have all considered him brilliant.
Well, and now he's back.
Let's talk about that.
So real quick, before we move on, I do have two questions about WeWork, and then we can move on. But so first one, do you guys think it's possible that like WeWork operating at a loss and Adam Neumann personally providing like the real estate like resources for the company, is it possible that like WeWork is just a vehicle for him to just purchase more personal real estate and like justify that and pay the mortgage and expenses and then like have the company at a loss?
I know
based on what you guys saw.
So 9 months ago, he's really pushing his family fund where they're investing in tech and they're investing in crypto. They're investing in quite a bit of things. So I don't know. As far as I know from my research, is he only did that to 4 buildings. They were gigantic buildings, but that's the only one that, and he says there was a loss at it.
Okay.
And for anybody listening, that maybe was the purpose.
And I think when he failed IPO / stepping down was cashing out, but it was also some of those buildings he like agreed to sell them officially.
Yeah.
Transition the asset from his name to WeWork, and apparently, allegedly, it was for the price that he paid for them.
Oh,
So
he didn't gain.
So, and I don't the details to me are murky on that. I didn't do enough research to find out exactly how, and maybe they didn't have to disclose it. I don't know.
Did you call Adam and talk to him about it?
I did not.
Okay.
But again, it's kind of like, okay, there was it wasn't all rosy for him, right? I mean, like, because I think if he had his druthers, he would still be the CEO and it would be trying to grow it. And to your point, the co-CEOs that took over for him, they did eventually IPO through a SPAC, and they seem to be sort of maybe riding the ship, and maybe this thing can be a viable business. But
it's tough because like he and his founders made this company from nothing, and it's hard to. Nobody wants a CEO to make $300 million, $1 billion. People hate on Elon Musk, but I mean, if I put 10, 15 years into something,
we want CEOs to make billions of dollars.
Yeah. I mean, like I want people to be rich, but I also want them to take care of their employees. And that's what a lot of
investors.
Yeah. I feel like maybe they could have done better, but you're right. When he had to step down, he went from chairman. Now he's removed from chairman. He's removed from being a CEO to now for a while, he had an observer position on the board, which means he could only observe, I can't even say the word, observe the meetings.
So like super passive?
Yes. And what's funny is he said, as he sat there for a year, he was there for, if anybody asked him things, he could answer, but he was only there to like listen and respond. Nobody asked him for advice for a year.
Really?
And he said he felt like maybe that was okay. He said it was humbling. I hear it. This is my baby. I'm the chairman. I'm on top. I'm going to be the president of the world too. You sit there, you shut up. And now he doesn't even have that position. So I think it's humbling to him. And it goes to, if anybody trying to be a CEO, it's like, do your thing, but like, remember, there's people helping hold that ladder for you as you reach for the stars. So,
So let me ask my final WeWork question. I keep seeing that it's a tech company. I don't really understand why. It seems like a commercial real estate company, but like, why is it considered a tech company?
I don't consider it a tech company.
I don't either.
Okay.
There is tech involved. There's a lot of networking. There's a lot of like apps. There's stuff, but it comes down to it's real estate kind of covered in the facade of tech.
Was there like a?
Well, I'm sure they're hosting a lot of tech startups in their buildings.
Like for example, they're
is there a user interface component where like Airbnb has the app and you can like?
I mean, kind of, but like for example, they're in 60 countries. So every time they update something, it's in 60 languages. It's a lot of work. There's a lot of software engineers there, but it's not quite like Facebook.
I would imagine they don't have a lot of IP in tech. If I had to guess, they were probably leveraging some sort of existing platform to do all of this stuff.
So there was obviously a big fallout, and he's removed from being a CEO. The company is 80% fallen, and so with that disdain and everybody hating him, going from golden child to possible fraud, he's moved on to something else. And can you introduce us into his next, like he, in a sense, a pariah. Nobody would take his call now. So
you got to start something. You got to start something else.
He disappeared for a while, right?
2 years.
Yeah. So now he's back, and he actually has two, and this is very, very recent. So just this year, he has two ventures that aren't quite, from what I could tell, they're not quite live yet, but they're starting to get out there. And he's moved on from the word we to the word flow. So he has a new company that's allegedly launching in like October or something. Very soon, or maybe in early 23, sometime the next, say, 6 months is when they plan to launch it, called Flow. And then there's another company.
It's a period tracking app.
Yes. Yeah. There's another company called Flow Carbon, that he's raised over $100 million for. Very quickly, we're not going to talk about Flow Carbon because there's almost no detail on it at all, other than what I have to say.
And they're using the blockchain.
Yes, so they'll be using the blockchain to essentially tokenize carbon credits, so like carbon emissions credits, and there'll be some kind of blockchain interface where they track who owns the carbon credits and you can trade them. And there's
a lot of fraud in carbon credits.
And that's so there may be blockchain maybe can solve the fraud aspect of it, but that's like all we know is that he's involved with this company maybe called Flow Carbon, and there's blockchain and carbon credits. That's kind of, and he's raised over $100 million just this year for that effort. But so wow. And then, but what we really want to finish with is Flow. It's a new company that's going to sound a lot like WeWork. It's
remember Green Desk? Yeah, it's like this. Does he just keep doing the same thing over and over again?
Same formula.
So Flow is basically WeWork, but for residential real estate. Now, if the listeners may remember, we briefly at one point mentioned something called We Live. So really what Flow is We Live, which is a similar concept, giant residential real estate properties, and they're reimagining residential rent apartment buildings. That's basically what they're doing. These are not houses. These are giant apartment buildings. So, but
is he coming out with a new interface, like something that makes it more Airbnb, like something that makes it more?
So there is a blog post. What's crazy is, so I don't know. I'm not quite sure what the order we want to do this in, but SoftBank is clearly probably down on Adam Neumann, but he has found more experienced tech investors. So Mark Anderson and Ben Horowitz, who are tech investor royalty, they were early on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. They were even they've actually developed some tech themselves in the early 90s with like SSL and JavaScript. They were kind of the very early. They had one of the earliest internet browsers. So these guys can do tech, and then they got rich off of that, and then they invested in tech very successfully.
So how did he like go from that, like from a fledgling company and being ousted to getting people to invest hundreds of millions of dollars? Like, is he just that good at convincing people, or does he have something?
Well, so
yeah.
I mean, so we'll talk about Flow, and we'll just see if maybe there is something here. But basically, the idea is, so then according to the New York Times, Flow will operate 3,000 apartments that Neumann owns. So again, remember back to WeWork when he owned the buildings and leased them to WeWork. So now Flow, Neumann owns these apartment buildings in Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Atlanta, and Nashville so far. Mostly new buildings, I'm sure very, very nice. 200 units each. They all have dog parks, co-working spaces. Sounds like WeWork. Putting greens. Like, these are the nicest.
How many kegs do they have?
Well, yeah. And so
instead of water on tap, it's literally just beer.
Just shower and beer.
So here's what the New York Times said. Adam Neumann aims to rethink the housing rental market by creating a branded product with consistent service and community features. Flow will operate the properties Neumann has bought and also offer its services to new developments and other third parties. Exact details of the business plan could not be learned.
That sounds like WeWork.
And then August 15th.
We live.
Yeah. So August 15th, Anderson and Horowitz, the big guys, $350 million. They announced $350 million investment in Flow. So he had SoftBank dump billions of dollars into WeWork. Now he's got these guys, which are tech investor royalty, dumping money into Flow. And these guys, in a blog post on August 15th, shared not only that they're investing the money, but why and how awesome this is. And these are some of the things. Now, remember, Adam has been known to be kind of maybe a good salesman is a way to put it. This is the blog post, some of the things that the guys said in the blog post. Anderson and Horowitz.
Do you have it in front of you?
I do have it right here,
brother.
So, America is forming households faster than it's building homes. True. Yeah. Like there's a backlog of houses that could last multiple years, right? If true, building apartments seems like a good idea. But of course, everybody already knows that. That's why the apartment market has been red hot for a couple of years now, right? Then he describes how homeownership is difficult today due to low inventory and prohibitively high costs. Even if you can buy a home, Anderson says you're stuck. You can't move. Even if your economic opportunity or life path wants to take you somewhere else, so you get a job somewhere else. It's apparently very hard to sell your home, according to Anderson. He describes apartment life. Okay, listen very carefully. He describes apartment life as a soulless experience. So he's hating on apartment life and how awful it is, while investing $350 million in apartments.
Well, hold on though. Is it the case with Flow that you actually gain equity in the property as well?
That's not clear. Maybe the case.
Maybe that was a We Live thing.
Guys,
too.
is it going to be a timeshare that they're going to sell? No, seriously. What if they sell a mortgage, but you can have your house move anywhere? Is it going to be like a reinvented Like it's apartment. You could go live in one in New York, and then you could just move your lease over to this place.
So that's what I'm thinking.
But you're locked in.
Less like timeshare and more like gym membership. Like Gold's Gym has an option where you can go, if you pay the certain membership, you can go to any Gold's Gym. And I think Planet Fitness is the same.
So if you're like a gold member at Flow, you get like
you can move from Fort Lauderdale to Nashville.
Some of the units are nicer, and then like if you pay a certain amount, you can be in any gold unit anywhere in the network or whatever you want to say. But and then just a few more notes real quick. He says, do you even meet your neighbors, much less have any friends in your complex? Does it feel like home or just a place to sleep? Are you proud to bring friends and family to visit or hesitant? Apartments don't generate any bond between person and place and without community.
It's because the parking always sucks. That's why.
Yeah.
By the time you reach your house, you want to punch your neighbor.
And so
for parking in your spot.
Yeah. All that to say is like, well, and then he also points out the idea that you can rent for years and get zero equity out of it. But like, so, which it's so weird that Anderson would say something like that when he reportedly lives in a $177 million house in Malibu. Ooh. And he's reportedly spent $255 million total in 3 more homes in the area just over this past year. So
I wonder if he knows his neighbors.
So here, you're right. So here's this guy. So, but again, doesn't it just ring a little bit funny that Adam Neumann is going to somehow change apartment life from it's described as a soulless experience by the tech guru who hasn't lived in an apartment in a very long time. Maybe he never has. I don't know. But like he has multiple mansions in Malibu now. And somehow Adam is going to change apartment life from a soulless experience by adding to an amazing experience by somehow adding a putting green is going to make you be friends.
I want to know what they know. Like you don't fork over $300 million without wanting that back times 10. Like you want that money back. And these are not stupid guys. So it's either like Adam has just like a spell on people when he talks to them. I don't know. Like,
well, what's the blockchain component to this? Is that
that's flow carbon. That's the carbon credits thing.
Oh, okay.
So here's the thing. A lot of times with like serial entrepreneurs, a lot of times we have our time focusing. So sometimes you can confuse the heck out of everybody when you're talking about.
We've talked about this.
Oh, because you know me. Like sometimes
both of us
going into meetings, we're like, we only have to talk about this. If we talk about this, we're going to sound crazy. So I feel like Adam is an entrepreneur. I think his lifestyle is crazy. I think he was living the rock star lifestyle, and he probably should have been working a little more. Berkshire Hathaway guy, what's his name?
Warren Buffett.
Warren Buffett. I can't believe I forgot his name.
Somewhere in between. He needs a brown bag for lunch and like a 2000 Toyota Camry. Somewhere between. Somewhere in between. I
think it's a good idea to not get your pilots high, and probably have everybody on your staff drinking too much.
Yeah.
But I think that it goes to show.
By the way, we're sponsored by Maker's Mark today. Just speaking of
we're not
drinking too much.
But I mean,
no, we're not, but it could be.
Give us a call.
Even though I drink coffee.
Give us a call, Makers.
But to your point, I mean, like Flow with the latest investment, Flow is now valued at over $1 billion. So he's done it again. He's got another company with a lot. And again, it's real estate. Like real estate is not necessarily a bad industry to be in. But again, this idea that somehow it's going to be successful by branding, like bringing brand to an industry that's never had hyper brand before. It's like, well, but there's a reason for that.
Why is it called Flow? What's the idea behind that brand?
You've got me on that. But like, why? Like, people have made billions in real estate forever without a cool brand.
They've done it quietly.
So why now does a brand? What's the competitive advantage? And I don't see it. I personally don't see it. Not that it'll fail necessarily, but I don't see what the competitive advantage is. Why is this any better than any other thing?
Said like a true engineer. Like, show me the facts. Okay.
Show me the numbers.
Before we wrap this up, you're in branding.
Yes.
I'm in branding. You work for a Fortune 100 company, or at least Fortune 500.
You're going to ask me about why brand this?
Well, in general, I've been in branding feels like my whole life, from helping brand churches all the way to help branding companies. Why is he so obsessed with branding? It's just real estate, but how can you brand that into $1 billion valuation when it's just real estate?
Yeah, so I agree with Phil, but I will say, so just to kind of play devil's advocate and answer your question, I mean, if you think about all kinds of other aspects of people's life that become lifestyle elements. Your car, you could say it's just transportation. It's just A to B.
Yeah.
Why do you want to drive a Corvette? Or why do people want to buy, drive a big F-350 when they don't actually ever haul anything? Why do you, identify with the Apple brand? And why do you want, an iPhone or a Mac
Not sponsored
computer?
by Apple yet. Is that true?
Not yet. Not yet. I would say for most people, your mortgage or your rent is going to be your largest like personal expense every month. And so the idea that, and most people, I think, especially when they're buying real estate, when you're buying a home, like it becomes a big part of your identity. And I think renting as well. Like if you're renting somewhere that does have the pool, does have the dog park, does have this sort of like coveted community aspect, that becomes a part of your identity and who you are. So I can see
capitalizing on that.
You can see capitalizing on that and
Yeah.
really sort of like creating that brand and that community and that identity and like, oh yeah, I'm a Flow member.
Like I don't just live in Malibu. I live at WeWork Malibu.
Yes. Or Flow. We live.
Or sorry. Wow. You see what I did
If you
there?
live at
Flow
WeWork,
Malibu. Sorry.
You might
Flow
be working too
Nashville.
much.
Yeah, I must be. Yeah. That's why I was really interested in I'm really interested in your guys' perspectives on this because I as much as I'm kind of the skeptic here, I definitely agree. I mean, the company we work for is very passionate about its brand, protects it like crazy. And think about Disney, there's Coca-Cola, like the brands, even something like ExxonMobil, their brand is worth billions, hundreds of billions of dollars in some cases. And so there is a place for a brand to Nike, right? Just do it. Brand can be super powerful. I don't know that it's being appropriated correctly here.
Let me just wrap it up like this. I feel like branding is reputation guarding. It's a way to help control your reputation, as far as when we're marketing, you want to control that. So someone like ExxonMobil, the brand is more along the lines of are we still putting out the same message? Is that the reputation we want? But WeWork they know for a fact, and Flow knows that if you talk like Apple, where Apple's they don't talk about the specifics. They talk about how you'll feel when you do this. You're creative. When you grab that Mac, you're making music. They talk about that. They don't talk about it's got the fastest CPU, it's got the most RAM. It's it's got is they tell you that when your friends come over.
Why are suddenly the Apple marketing folks cattle ranchers?
Well, I'm just my point is
not
it's
the Apple cat.
That's
That's
the
what
Apple
everybody else
people.
does.
Well, think about how many times it's got a Ford F-350, blah blah blah. It's it's very spec oriented, whereas nobody cares about how much how much engines are in a Tesla. They don't know.
Well, let's go back to cars for a second. Okay. So to your point, people will talk about whether it's Corvette or even up into more supercar space, people want to buy the status symbol of a Ferrari or Lamborghini, and they'll talk about, okay, this vehicle has 700 horsepower, right? At the rear axle or whatever. It's got X amount of torque. You can't use that driving in public. When it's 55 or less is your average speed limit. So people get into this idea of oh man, I'll have this powerful car that can do all these things, and they get attached to the specs, but they don't need it. They don't, and I think the same thing people who buy Macs,
but there's two different people.
Use them to their extent necessarily.
No. There's two different type of people. The people who love the stats and they're going to dig into the details. You're kind of a stats person, you like the details.
I'm saying they're one and the same. The stats piece, but then also the lifestyle piece.
Well, but I feel like more people don't necessarily care about we've got the best plumbing in this building. It's not going to ever clog. We got the best fire extinguishers. Yeah. What they care about is when your friends walk in, they're going to know you are successful. Do you see that dog park? I don't have a dog, but I could use it. And
if your friends are firefighters, they'll not only appreciate the layout of the building and just how great and fun it is, but also
golfer,
the fire code.
But check out that putting green.
I've got 2 extra spaces to park. It's going to be more along the lines of how I feel in this environment. As far as renting a building, and Apple's doing the same thing. And I think that's what WeWork did. It's the experience. You're going to be cool if you come here. And you're going to get young, cool, hip people. And I mean, at the end of the day, he made several $1 billion. I think it's still to be determined whether or not he's going to be the villain as much as everybody thinks he is, which he kind of looks like he kind of is. But there's a lot of movies out or coming out. In fact, that who's the guy from 40 Seconds to Mars? Or 30 Seconds to Mars? David Leto?
Jared Leto.
So Jared Leto is playing. Yeah, Jared Leto is playing him in the movie that's coming out. And Adam asked Jared, like, should I watch it? And he looked at Adam and said, no, you should not. So he's getting a full face prosthetics to look like him.
Really?
And he's going to play the part of him. And then he tells Adam, you don't want to watch the movie. And that, first off, how can you look like somebody, do a story about somebody, make a ton of money off of somebody, and never give that person a dime? And he's still alive. To me, there's some weird. Kind of like, there's some kind of like, but I can't take a picture of him and then try to sell it, if he has IP on his picture or his face, which he's a celebrity, so he technically can't, but like, I can't do that of Elvis. I can't use, without paying Elvis's people some money to make a movie about Elvis.
Like you can't grab somebody's song and put it as like the outro of your podcast episode and like, I don't own the rights to this. And if you have more than 5 seconds of it, it gets taken down.
Well, not even just that. You can't tell the story of Elvis and use the word Elvis, but you can do it to Adam because he's alive. And
you can make like an entire movie off of him.
We created the song to our podcast, by the way.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You guys wrote it? Co-wrote that?
No, you did.
We just slammed it together.
Awesome.
There was no like writing per se.
That's cool.
Here's how the story goes for our theme song. Okay, I called him up and said, I'm putting together a crappy intro. Make us something. And he, like in 2 days, he made something, sent it over. Nice. His song was better than my intro, so I had to remake my intro.
Well, that could have gone either way. I could have said the same thing to you, and it probably would have been better.
How long is your song? Is it like a 5-minute song, but we only ever hear 30 seconds of it?
Oh, you hear like
lyrics
4
to
seconds.
We've shortened it, but it's the same thing over and over.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
Well, we should wrap this up. Phil, thanks for coming on, man. It's cool.
Thanks, guys.
I think we'll have you on again.
Awesome.
And,
thanks for bringing all this info.
I would love that. It was very fun.
I think overall,
we're going to have to make him part of the regular rotation here.
Would you invest in Flow? Either one, either the crypto or the real estate. Would you invest, honestly? In summation, yes, no.
I feel like I'd rather invest in my own real estate ventures that I like have control of. I don't know anything about, what he's doing. I just don't, large scale residential real estate in those areas. Like, I don't know. I probably know.
I would say no. I'd probably go my own or work with somebody to get my own real estate deals. If you want to go something super simple through your E-Trade app, shout out to E-Trade or Robinhood or whatever. There's a lot of real estate companies. There's REITs that pay a lot of times huge dividends that have cash flowing properties. Like if you want exposure to real estate, there's much lower risk ways to do it than.
Well, let's get our brothers on here one day, because my brother's a realtor. Your brother works in real estate in a variety of complex ways. Real estate investment.
He does some real estate investing. Yeah.
Let's bring him on. We should have brought him on for this podcast.
Yeah. He would.
So
we'll do a brother podcast.
Just to wrap this up, because we're kind of going over and my phone is dying. And it was the timer. So I would invest in the carbon credits blockchain thing. In fact, even
though we don't know anything about it
you
yet?
did say flow carbon too. Okay.
If they do go public, I will invest some money in it, because I've been saying for a long time, carbon credits are a joke. In fact, I've looked into I would love to do something with carbon credits, because countries exchange carbon credits. The farmers exchange carbon credits. People like Tesla makes most of their money by selling carbon credits to OEMs.
Okay. So hold on one sec. I know we got to wrap up.
Okay.
Let's take a step back.
We're starting another episode here.
Yeah.
We're going to, we are a little bit. Can you explain carbon credits? Because I don't really know much about them, just for anybody that doesn't know what you're talking about.
In my dumbness, I'm going to wrap this up as much as I possibly can.
Just summarize. Yeah.
First off, it's kind of complex, but what it is like some states and governments require that organizations and companies stay with under a certain amount of carbon, like emissions. Okay. If they go over, he has a massive company. I have a little dinky company, but we have the same amount of credits that we can do, certain amount of carbon. Well, I only used 1/10 of mine. I can then sell my carbon credit to him that's over.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's basically BS because
it's
the same
like-
amount of carbon's in the air.
It's this intangible sort of valuation placed on your emissions.
Exactly. So what happens is there's carbon credit companies that plant trees, and I air quote because a lot of them have been caught like selling carbon credits off the same 1,000 acres to multiple companies. So there's I'm talking billions of dollars of fraud, but the companies don't care because all they want to do is like continue to make
and not get fined whatever government is trying to fine them.
So in California, there's a lot of fraud going on with that. So for me, when I heard about the carbon credit thing, I was just like, that could be a solution to a multi-billion-dollar problem a quarter.
So like Tesla, they only make electric vehicles, which is no carbon because we're not going to admit the fact that there's carbon emissions associated with generating electricity, which charges the car. But so they have,
but they also have solar.
Yeah,
but that's further down the line, and we don't think
But
about
basically, they make like hundreds of millions of dollars a quarter selling carbon credits. I think the flow thing, if it's legit and it's not BS, it could be revolutionary if someone doesn't beat him to the punch.
Yeah, blockchain, you can't. It's so early. You can't necessarily just say, "Oh, it's gonna like it could." There's gonna be a bunch of money made once blockchain really gets going.
Is the idea that the blockchain will ensure legitimacy?
Yes.
In the whole program,
Because the future of blockchain is going to be
trackable and
also
everything.
contracts. If I have a contract, who's validating it? It could literally be the blockchain because everybody has proof that happened. He can't be AT&T and change the contract and be like, no, you signed this. I'm like, no, I didn't sign that.
Yeah.
We've got proof that you did.
Yeah.
That blockchain validates it. So that's my dumb man's version of what blockchain that could do for the future. So yes, I would invest, even though he's a crazy man, but he did bring a real estate company from a few buildings to a $9 billion worth company, even though he got ousted.
You got me on flow carbon. I'll give a small position. I'll give a small position. I'll open a small position
Honestly,
on
if I
flow
could,
carbon, but
I'd
not flow the apartment buildings.
I'd drop 10K on it if it was like going public soon.
I'll give him 1% of my portfolio.
Which is more than 10 grand.
But he's far from the first person, and certainly far from the craziest person to brand a thing.
Yep.
Yes.
You know, like bring to the market this new perspective on a thing, and sell it, you know, maybe in an outsized way compared to what had been before. I mean, there's all kinds of cases there. So I don't know if he's crazy.
Well,
I have faith in the people who invested in him more than I have faith in him.
Sure.
Yeah.
But this is the type of stuff. He's the type of person, or these are the type of businesses that appear late in a 10-year bull run with super low interest rates. Like that, this type of stuff happens. I mean, think about the meme stock craze with AMC.
It was great. I made so much money
and all
off of
that. Right. But like, this is what happens late in a bull market. Everybody thinks that it's just going to go on forever, and it's risk on, and you can borrow money for nothing. And then, so any idea sounds like a good idea because there's no risk in it. Right.
Because the market's just appreciating no matter what.
And if you come into that environment with a good brand and a good pitch, you can raise $9 billion or $350 million, whatever it is.
I would say to anybody who lost a bunch of money in the meme stock, some people made a lot of money. Look, it's part of it. You got to learn your lessons.
Shiba Inu and stuff like that.
Yeah, some people lost a lot of money in this market crash. They weren't prepared for the
Well, that's cryptocurrency specifically, but even there were stocks too that were kind of meme stocks.
Well, even with
like what?
with
Like what?
AMC theaters.
Yeah.
Oh,
a lot of people made a lot of money off of it, but also I mean, it's kind of a meme stock, but
what's it called? The
GameStop is too.
GameStop
Yeah, because again, theaters and video game stores are a dying industry.
Yeah,
and they're heavily shorted by institutions. But then retail investors realized this, and then they bought. And then they force the shorts to cover, and then the share price goes way up.
Which we're getting kind of deep in that. We'll talk about that on another podcast.
Yeah.
Look,
Jake's just trying to wrap this thing up
because we got another podcast after this. Look, Phil, I appreciate it. I do wish you were an aromatherapy consultant because that would be an interesting.
There's always still time. Yeah, there's probably not a lot of engineers.
I'm 34 years old. We'll see where life takes me. Yeah. If I end up as a Duck Dynasty aromatherapist, salesman, consultant, I will come back on your podcast and I will.
Don't do Duck Dynasty because I feel like
the mountain that I will have inevitably chased.
I just feel like those guys probably don't smell the greatest.
No,
they're nice guys,
but also like I don't know how much they're doing necessarily these days. I'm sure they're well off, but I mean, like, I don't think that show's still airing, right?
No, but we should.
But they have a new one.
Oh, they do?
We should totally do an episode on them.
They're treasure hunting now.
Yep.
It's pretty awesome.
We should do an entire episode on them because they actually are kind of business pros.
Yeah, and lots of money.
Just to reiterate, Dave owes Bobby back there, our producer, about $6 because if you hit this hype button and don't yell the word business pro, you owe her $1. I made the rules up and poor Dave is out of luck.
Yeah, but see, I bought the hype button. So like, that's my thing. I feel like
you got a credit of $7.92.
It's like carbon credits a little bit. Like it doesn't exist really. It's just an agreement that we'll exchange.
That's it. We're Chasing Mountain Podcast and we'll talk forever. Appreciate you guys. We're getting close to, what are we at right now?
Well, we just went over 18,000 subscribers.
Oh, wow. We're over 18,000. Yeah. So anyways,
that's awesome.
That's it.
So yes, please like and subscribe, comment below. We kind of covered all kinds of things tonight. So would love to hear your thoughts on Adam Neumann, WeWork, We Live, Flow, whatever. Make sure you comment. We always enjoy the comment section. Yes. It's outrageous. There's still all kinds of comments on our Mr. Beast short. So
gosh, those are funny. Go read some of them. Half of them are true. Half of them hurt my feelings.
But listen, if you're
joking.
Here's the rule though about the Mr. Beast short. If you're going to make fun of the fact that we say business pro, even though we didn't hit the button, you have to spell business right.
Yes, please.
Like at least like 60% of the people who make fun of the fact that we said business pro about Mr. Beast, they didn't spell it right. And that's kind of a problem for me. So like, come on.
Spell check.
At least meet that standard. On that note, thank you guys. We'll see you next time.
Peace out.
The thoughts and opinions on this show do not reflect those of our advertisers, employers, or other affiliates. The content should not be considered legal or financial advice. The Chasing Mountains podcast is a production of Chasing Mountains Media. Copyright 2022.